Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. Here we go. Two professionals just about to embark on a conversation. Cheryl, it is fantastic to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Guy. I'm delighted to be with you today.
And I'm very excited to have you on. I've tracked you a little bit from a distance, which always sounds a little bit odd unless it turns into a podcast. But we've had these conversations just on LinkedIn, and we've made this arrangement. And so I know who you are, and I would be really glad if you would just give the audience just that introduction as to who you are and to what you do and where you put your energy.
Absolutely. I'm Cheryl Stokes. I'm a partner at Heidrick and Struggles, and I focus on leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've spent the last 25 years or so of my career doing that.
And it's a topic that has got so, I was just saying to you before we started, with a good bottle of wine and some food, every one of these topics is its own week of conversation. So we'll touch lightly, but hopefully give them some justice. But I would love to. I've always found that understanding how somebody got to the role that they're in very often adds a huge amount of flavour and value to their somebody's opinions and perceptions. So I'd love to get that. In essence, how did you get to where you are today? It'd be lovely to hear some part of that.
Oh, thank you so much, Guy. And, I apologize. I will try not to go on and on. I'm going to apologize in advance because it's a story with lots of twists and turns. I am originally from Flint, Michigan, which many people know as the birthplace for General Motors. My father was an assembly line worker for General Motors, and I grew up in a working class home. Was good in math and science. And in those days, people said you should be an engineer. And so my very first job in high school was working for Buick Motor Division. And that, after school, piqued my interest in engineering. I went on to General Motors Institute, which is now called Kettering, but majored in electrical engineering. And the entire time being in undergraduate college, which you would call university, spent time working as well as going to school because it was cooperative education. Enjoyed that very much, but decided when I graduated that I wanted to have even more practical engineering experience. And so I went to work for an aluminum, or you might say aluminium company in the U.S. And
we don't know what aluminum is.
I know, I had to translate for my colleagues on the continent, aluminium. And it was there that I was actually introduced very early on to the topics of diversity and inclusion, because my second week of work as a young engineer, I was asked to go to a mandatory course on managing personnel diversity. And this organization wanted to transform its culture. They wanted to be more inclusive. And they selected a group of us to be internal consultants around change, really, diversity and change. And through that experience, I decided that while it was interesting to know how things work technically as an engineer, the really more interesting opportunities dealt with people. So I went to graduate school. I was in a program at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, called Leaders for Manufacturing. So it's a dual master's. And I was there at the time when Peter Senge, a management guru, was there with a group called the Organizational Learning Center. And that's really how I pivoted my career from engineering to consulting around learning and change. That led me to Coca-Cola. That then led me to help Duke University start a business, Duke Corporate Education, focused on customized leadership. And 3 years ago now, I joined Heidrick and Struggles because I was really interested in this, just the array of capability that firms like Heidrick, and I think Heidrick uniquely, brings to the market. We can help you identify the best leaders in the world. We can find them for you. We can assess your leaders. We can help you develop them. We can help build strong teams and organizations and cultures. And we can help ensure that you're doing that in the most inclusive fashion. So you really have a future-ready workforce. You have future-ready leaders, future-ready teams, a future-ready organization. So that's how I got here.
Boom. No, it's dropped the mic at that point. So I was introduced to Heidrick and Struggles when some years ago I watched some videos of the relatively famous Jerry Roche, sort of the recruiter of the century. I mean, how's that for a win? Regardless of, I don't know how you get that title, but that's how I got that kind of introduction. But more than that I really came to understand that Heidrick has this great reach, and it has this great sense of capacity, I think, to work with people and organizations, almost like the lifespan, I guess, of somebody. So you really are able to pick on people at the formative maybe part of their career and work with them for the foreseeable future. So that was very powerful to understand. And I'd really be, I think, if we just jump straight into it, if we look at your, the inverted commas, your day job, that kind of sense of just what do you find yourself doing when in terms of developing and working with organizations or individuals? Is it from one-to-one coaching? Is it with effective teams? Is it running masterclasses and workshops and keynotes? Is it running programs? Is it all of the above? Tell me, in a 12-month period, if I was to watch you on a documentary, what would I go, wow, that's what I'd see you doing? It'd be fascinating to understand that.
Oh my goodness, what a great question. So definitely all of the above, the things that you mentioned, number one. Number two, if you watched me over 12 months, you'd probably say, oh my goodness, she does such a variety of things, which really speaks to my joy of learning and doing multiple things. So the headline would be developing future-ready leaders and organizations. That's what I'm doing. What it looks like is, for some clients, I'm helping them define or refine a leadership framework. So what does it mean to even be a good leader? And then we are designing development experiences to ensure they have the leadership capability that can help lead them into the future. It might be programmatic, it might involve coaching, it might involve masterclasses. All the things that you mentioned are one part of it. There could be assessment, there could be developmental debriefing, et cetera. That's one aspect. On the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, given the social context, particularly the last 18 months to 24 months have been extraordinarily busy on this front, because organizations recognize that we have to leverage 100% of our talent. And so in order to do that, you have to have an environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging and inclusion, so that you can get, not social justice, although I'm a big fan of social justice. I'm a big fan of altruism. I mean, I'm an African-American woman with teenage boys. I want social justice. Let me be clear. But businesses aren't focusing on DEI solely for social justice. They're focusing because decades of research have shown that diverse and inclusive organizations outperform their competitors in the marketplace. There's empirical data that show if you want more innovation, you want better quality decision-making, you want better business results, then you need a diverse and inclusive organization. And so a lot of my time, particularly in these last couple of years, have been helping clients accelerate the inclusion of their environment.
Now, I'm super alert to this topic is embraced by some and feared by others. Mm-hmm. So I am not being, if you see me hesitating, you just might give me a kind of a nudge. But I think I'm really interested in, I think when we say diversity and inclusion, from psychological diversity, right, through to cultural diversity, through to, because there is something about these topics, if they are railroaded and owned by people with an agenda, they can frighten off people that might want to, weirdly enough, be inclusive about the topic, but on a much broader spectrum than a particular agenda, if that makes sense. And so I just wonder what your thoughts on, look, Guy, it's not linear. What it is, so it'd be good just to hear that from you. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, thank you for raising it. And you're right. This topic can cause fear for some people. And I believe it's because there's been a very narrow emphasis on what it means to have a diverse organization. I should start by saying our fundamental belief and knowledge is that everyone is in fact diverse. We all have a diversity story. There's neurodiversity, as you mentioned. There's, background, diverse experiences. The challenge is, in many parts of the world, there is some group that is underrepresented and therefore underleveraged in organizations based on, your customer base or the talent base that you're getting. And so what we've been trying to help clients do is to understand, what is the relevance of diversity, equity, and inclusion to your business purpose and strategy? How does having a more inclusive environment actually help you delight your customers and get the best talent, et cetera? Not to set quotas. And unfortunately, there's been a bad reaction, knee-jerk, from some organizations to say, we're not diverse enough. Let's go out and hire 20 women and, 5 people of color. That's not what we promote. What we promote is, do you have the organization and the talent that you need to propel your organization into the future, to connect with the clients that you need to connect with, and to get more than your fair share of the talent that's coming into the organization. Now, what we know is that about 2/3 of the, millennial and below talent, they look for diverse and inclusive organizations, and they mean neurodiversity, and they also mean representation. And so it is important. It is important to the extent of the diverse perspectives that diverse backgrounds brings is a huge benefit. And it's something that, you have to, it has to be owned by the business, first of all. It's not an HR initiative. And so we are working with business leaders to help business leaders understand, what is the relevance and how do I authentically lead in this arena so that our organization can accomplish its purpose.
So there's something here about an education piece for a strategic, commercial, and customer value. There's something here about future-proofing that says, this concept of tame and wicked problems. Right now you're in a situation that you can probably understand, but there's almost certainly a future coming. And how many organizations were top of the tree at one point and then fell off later. So actually the most likely organizations to thrive, from, if I've heard you correctly, are the ones that have the greatest capability to deal with the unknown, which is then that diversity of approach for situations as yet unknown. But you've got that resource inbuilt rather than going to have to find it. It's already in you. I think if I've heard that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one of the legacy firms that Heidrick acquired years ago is Sen Delaney Culture Shaping. And that's part of Heidrick Consulting, the part of the business that I sit in. And for years, decades, our culture shaping colleagues have worked to help organizations build healthy, thriving cultures, and inclusion has always been a part of it. In the last several years, within Heidrick, we actually looked very specifically at what does it take to develop a healthy, thriving, inclusive culture, because it's been something that has come to the forefront as more and more data has come out where people haven't felt as included. And so you've seen some of the dynamics around the world of, different populations just not being able to thrive in organizations. And so again, all of the work in this arena is, as you said, future proofing. It's helping get more innovation, better quality decision, better financial results, get the best from all of your talent so that you're able to create the future that you want to. And so a leader's ability to be agile, and, I can certainly tell you Heidrick has a point of view about agility, inclusive, and to have digital dexterity are three huge themes that we understand to be differentiating for the most successful leaders and, in fact, organizations.
So I think, very intrigued by what some people have as a learned experience of, that's how I frame the world. And we could talk about confirmation bias and things like that, but almost to the point of, I found that kind of person really works for me, or I found that that's the way I like to develop people, and of course, when you're a certain seniority, there's a kind of validation in, well, look, I've got here, so how wrong can I be? Which is kind of going on for some people, and I think I notice it's to approach somebody that's in a position of failure. It's potentially a lot easier to engage them as to how they might do things differently. But when you're engaging people that are in their own mind probably doing quite well, and then to offer them a new point of reference, that's the bit I think I'm quite interested in. And I just wonder how that sort of sits with you, or how you think about that.
Yeah, you raise a great point. There's a saying, what got you here won't get you there. And I think if nothing else, our global pandemic and the volatility in the world, in particularly these last 18 months, has shown many organizations and leaders that it's no longer good enough to sort of maintain the status quo. And so I think there's more openness now, just due to world events and external factors. But if you talk about learning and change for anyone, there is a need to help shift or expand the frame, if you will, so that people are even open to doing something different, something new. And with many businesses, the ability to show bottom line improvements, the ability to show enhanced results are what can give you the permission, if you will, to engage leaders on this thought that maybe there's something I could do to be even more successful. So, Heidrick has a point of view that comes from research that we've done with the FT 500 over a number of years. So we have looked at the highest performing organizations in the world who are in the top tier in terms of their profitability, their ability to sustain margins over the medium term, not just short term, not being state-owned, growing organically. And when you put very stringent filters, as we did on the FT 500, the list quickly drops to less than 20 who meet that criteria. So we did a body of research on what these organizations did differently. And we show through our data that it is these organizations' ability to mobilize, execute, and transform with agility is what differentiates them. And so Heidrick has built a whole suite of intellectual property, intellectual capital around Meta, our framework of accelerating performance. We've written books about it. We have diagnostics that help us understand Meta and the drive factors underneath it at the organizational level, the team level, and the individual leader level. And while Mobilize, which is inspiring aligned action, looks different at an organizational level versus a team level versus an individual leader level. And, execution, same thing, transforming, which is about, optimizing the existing business while you're creating and reinventing and making the new business model to succeed for the future. Agility is the same. And agility goes back to your ability to be adaptable, so to pivot and to learn. So it's adaptability, it's learning, it's resilience to bounce back from setbacks and to inspire energy, and then it's foresight to be able to anticipate things that are coming, and then to create the ability to thrive despite ambiguity and a changing future. So we look at agility at the individual leader level, and when organizations and leaders understand the difference in business results that come, but also in engagement and the organization for people who are connected with leaders who work in this way and who are part of an organization that has a broader purpose where they can see the line of sight. All of these things contribute to better results, and it makes people open to expanding their frame. Sorry for the wordy answer, but I had to kind of give you the empirical basis for what we're talking about.
No, I love it. There's a couple of things going on for me there. One is that this isn't about saying somebody's doing something wrong. I mean, they may or may not be, but this is about saying if we have understood the data correctly and this is correct, then this is what optimum looks like. And if you think you're doing everything that's here, then that is what it is. But there's a very good chance that we're going to offer you some insights and some data and some observations, because guess what? We do this for a living, so we can look over a much broader spectrum. But we're pretty sure we're right because the evidence tells us that we are. So, and that gives somebody the reason to pay attention. Not that I'm per se wrong, but you're offering me a version of good that I should probably pay attention to. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in agility, there's a quote by Reg Revan, who's the father of action learning. He said, learning must be equal to or greater than the change that's going on around you. And I think I'm hearing that in that agility piece.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, learning, and I love learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I love education. I love practical learning, and in my work in leadership, acceleration, development, learning, I understand to be, very personal experience, but also a collective experience. And so, the ability of organizations to test ideas, to experiment, to continuously iterate, to, all of the things you hear about it in sort of agile DevOps, right? To fail fast. That also applies at an individual level, the experimenting with new behaviors, trying on new ideas and failing fast if something doesn't work, and then learning from it and adjusting and trying the new thing to enhance and grow yourself and your organization. I'm a huge fan of learning.
I like that idea of, trying on a learning or an idea can be almost like going into a clothing store and trying something on, right? It may look great in the window, but it might not suit you, or you might need to wear it in a little bit, like a good pair of shoes, So there's just something about that attitude towards, you've got to try different things, etc. So I like that a lot. In terms of where do you see people when people struggle maybe with this particularly this diversity and inclusion? What are the hurdles for some people that you maybe notice or experience when you're looking at a new organization or a new team? I'm guessing that there are some inherent truths that before you even get there, there's going to be a distribution curve of those that are already there and can't wait, all the way through to, not really interested for a whole host of reasons. And I just wonder what you see the barriers are for an organization or a team or even an individual when it comes to, and I think the difference between intellectually understanding and manifesting as an overt set of behaviors that would tell others that even if you're not using the language, it would be clear that you're working from that position. And I wonder what that, because getting it intellectually is no doubt a barrier, but I don't think it's the biggest one, right? So
no, I totally agree. I think organizations struggle in this arena when, number one, They haven't understood or thought about the business relevance. When
Mm.
they're seeing it as, again, purely social justice or something altruistic, but if they see no reason for the business, or they aren't able to make the connection between how diversity, equity, and inclusion actually furthers their business. That's hurdle number one. So if they see it as a one-off HR initiative where you're trying to check a box and you want to, get 5 more people of color in this position, then they're missing the boat. And those tend to be short-sighted initiatives where you end up with a revolving door of talent, right? Secondly, where their purpose and values aren't well defined and they don't necessarily align or don't necessarily invite inclusion. And that's a big thing. Purposeful organizations who have thought about their values. Who are we? Why do we exist as an organization? And how does it help our shareholders? How does it help all of our stakeholders? How does it help the communities where we operate, et cetera? And then finally, organizations who aren't concerned about people and engagement tend to struggle because, one of the things we talk about is, diversity is a fact. It's the visible and invisible differences that we all have and everyone's diverse. Inclusion is an act. It is being intentional in how you bring people into the circle. The result is belonging, which is an emotion, a feeling of community, a loyalty. And then out of that, you get higher engagement. And again, there's scores of data that people who feel a deeper sense of belonging and engagement to their workplace they take fewer sick days, they have higher productivity, all these positive benefits that impact the bottom line, but it has to come from an intentional space in the organization that aligns to purpose, values, and business relevance.
There's definitely something about discretionary effort coming from people that feel included. And I've long been of the belief that, of course, you can mandate my behavior, but in the sense of actions and tasks, but you can't mandate my thinking. And you can't mandate me spending time giving it quality thought rather than fearful thought. And that's going to, I've got to come up with an idea. Oh my gosh, is very different to me spending a day or a night or a month or even a year reflecting on something because I feel as if I want to contribute. And I'm definitely hearing that in what you're saying. I am particularly fascinated by, as a UK person looking into the US, and we're definitely getting it here, which is this whole, you said the word social justice. That's almost a topic I kind of, my eye starts twitching a little bit because I think what I experience is that, or what I observe is that any cause can be overrun or taken to a point where there's an extreme nature to it that actually does the cause more harm than good because the general population aren't there yet. Now, they might do, or they might never, but that's not the point. Getting me to eat healthy is one thing. Demanding I'm vegan is another. Telling me that I should probably do some exercise is one thing, but saying if you're not exercising 7 days a week, then you're not really serious. There's always a level, right, that can scare people off. And I wonder in organizations where people are, and I don't mean zealots, but just zealous. Heaven forbid they've turned into zealots, but they're zealous. Their overzealousness can actually bring a damage to those that aren't there yet in their thinking. And I just, again, almost an over enthusiasm to the person that's just starting to think about it could make somebody who's very keen and eager look like a zealot to somebody that hasn't even started thinking about it yet. And I just love some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I am. I was looking, and you might want to pause the tape on this. I was looking for a framework that we use in having what we call courageous conversations. And it describes a spectrum of engagement. And it sort of relates to some people's experience of DEI. And so give me just a moment.
Listen, the fact that you said pause the tape tells me that you and I are of the same age. Just the fact that you said that is awesome.
Yeah. I told someone the other day, yes, I studied electrical engineering, but I was actually in the days of analog when there was just the transition to digital, and I resisted it because
Listen, I have to tell you a very quick story just while you're doing that as well. I went to, I can say it now because it's funny and I almost don't mind saying it now, but I went to do some work some years ago at Yahoo in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I was going down to London and I was trying to find some parking near their offices. And I called into the office and person answered the phone. I said, I don't suppose there's, can you just tell me where the parking is? And the individual went, I'm sorry, I don't have a car, but you could just Google it. I mean, Yahoo it. I was like, yeah. Anyway, the point being, the reason I tell that is because when you come from a pre-search engine age, and when I was in, and I was, how long have you worked here? 15, 20 years? He goes, well, the internet hasn't been around that long. And you kind of go, you realize, oh gosh, I'm from an era.
I know.
I should go back to my piece of stone and chisel. And
I have to tell you, being at MIT in the mid 90s, I just think, wow, clearly I'm slow because all these things were being birthed, right? Yeah. And I'm like, why didn't I invest? Why didn't I figure out the right technology?
Because it was basically Star Trek. That's what we thought it was, So you're going to use the internet and you're going to stream video. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It was beyond. Well, that's why people are amazing, isn't it? Because they can see beyond the event horizon.
Exactly. But, well, of course, because I'm now looking. I can't, but I can tell you. I'll get the last. Just one thing I will get wrong, but it'll be close enough.
Don't worry.
So there's a spectrum, and if you think about sort of a thermometer with different levels, at the very bottom you find people who might be dismissive of any difference. They say we're all alike, we're all one human race. And while that's typically from a good sentiment, what it might say to someone who has a cultural identity or an identity of ethnicity like myself as an African American woman in a US context, if you say, well, I don't see color, you're telling me you don't see something significant about me in my life experience. And so while I appreciate the sentiment that you're trying to say, I don't judge people based on what I see externally, I also appreciate that there's a very real context that I face as a woman of color in the United States, that my teenage boys face as young men of color. And so, when someone is in that sort of dismissive of any difference, then, the way to connect is to actually educate, to help them understand that it's okay to see me for who I am. I appreciate that. That's not all that I am, but that's an important aspect of who I am, just as, depending on where you grew up or what your background might be, there are important things about your identity that I would not want to negate. If you go further up, then there are people who are divisive, where, they absolutely maybe see and acknowledge difference, but their reaction is to stereotype, to marginalize, to put a negative spin on it. And, certainly in social context, we see all kinds of divisiveness, on the political arena, on, as you said, extremists who want to divide by, polarizing, et cetera. Inside of organizations, this can show up as microaggressions. It can show up as, well, we don't offer this woman this role because, she's got young children or she's in childbearing age and, she may not want to travel. We make assumptions about someone based on how we assess them instead of understanding that unique individual and their perspective, their needs. And then you get a large category of people who are bystanders, where we experience and see differences, and we sort of just stand on the sidelines. So if I see a microaggression in the workplace, or if I hear maybe something that, makes me uncomfortable, I might not say anything because, quite frankly, not sure if it's worth the energy, the effort, may make me look like the bad person.
It's safer.
Exactly. And then you have people who are advocates where, you actually, and allies. So you recognize that we all come with diversity and diverse experiences, and we want to value the unique experiences and perspective that everyone brings. And we're willing to step up and call out when something is happening that is unintentionally disadvantaging someone else, or that even might be intentionally disadvantaging someone. So the comment about a woman and, a role, just pointing out that, what, we're making some assumptions about her being of a childbearing age or her familial situation. Maybe we should talk to her, right?
Or that person's autism, or that person's
exactly that person's dyslexia, whatever it might be. And then at the very top, you get people who are more activists, where they are so passionate about, and this might be in your language, extremist, where they're so passionate about the cause that their passion actually alienates people. And even though it might come from a good place, it may come from, if I just use, again, U.S. context, the civil rights era, lots of activists, and absolutely there was a need. I'm grateful for that activism. And if I'm an activist in my workplace and I see everything through the lens of, this happened to me because I'm Black, it happened to me because I'm a woman.
It's systemic.
And now I do believe systemic things occur, but that's another conversation. But if I come at everything with that lens,
everything is.
I alienate, as you said, people who might be allies, who might be inclined to actually have a more inclusive stance. And so the activists, when it comes from, the not negative agenda place, but it really comes from a place of inclusion, the activist has to think about adapting their strategies so that they're actually building a coalition of people who are advocates and allies who want to be more inclusive, versus it being a polarizing them versus us, and everything is as a result of the negativity. So that's the perspective I would like.
I love this, and we're going to run out of time.
But I know we are
fascinated by this topic, because I think it's people that virtue signal, people that are rescuing, people whose identity is wrapped up in that agenda, because it allows them to take a stance and to be strong on something and to be right about at least that. And it's a very interesting thing where, yes, if you're advocating it to create change that people can step up to, versus, no, you need to change at my rate and behave by my definition, that's when people become very resistant, even if you're right.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's fascinating as a topic. So listen, we were kind of just getting to the good stuff, but it's been fantastic just to kind of get a sense of, where you're coming from, where you put your energy, what you think about. And I don't know if you're able to do this, but just if somebody wanted to take that thinking further, and, is there anything you say, look, Guy, there's a book that should be read, or this is, I think, or an author that should be looked at, or a thinker that you should definitely look up, on the YouTube or their podcast? Is there anything that you should say just for people that have that interest and want to get more of an insight in this topic? This is where I would point them. Where would you point?
Wow, there are so many resources, and I will comment on a few things, because it sort of depends on where people want to go. But the first thing I'll do, and not to be a commercial, is to say that Heidrick and Struggles publishes lots of white papers, lots of IP around these topics. And we've gotten, some very good research-oriented pieces that talk about, these topics of agility, inclusion, digital dexterity, you name it, that you can get for free on, Heidrick.com. So,
yep, I've been there and got it for free, so it's definitely worth it.
And so there's a book. I'm looking to the side here because it's actually on my shelf over there. But there's a book in the U.S. context by Robert Livingston called The Conversation. The subtitle is How Seeking and Speaking the Truth About Racism Can Radically Transform Individuals and Organizations. So if you want to understand more of the social and historical context of race and ethnicity in the U.S., that's an excellent book to offer perspective. And I would also say there's a documentary on, I think it's on Netflix, called 13th. It's by Ava DuVernay, and it talks about the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and how some of the historic impacts of criminalizing classes of people. So it's a very in-depth, and it's not political, it doesn't, it's not anti-Republican and pro-Democrat. You'll see from this documentary that it actually looks at the American political spectrum to share.
Just on a personal, it's been a joy. These conversations for me are never enough. I could literally go on to the point where you go, I do need to go home now. So just respecting that and etc. But it's been an insight. Heidrick Struggles is an organisation that I look at it from the outside in, but it's always seemed to hold or held a level of quality and intent and value that I've always been able to respect from a distance. So that's I acknowledge that, and hearing you talk on your topics has been an absolute joy. So from me and listeners, however many there may be, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, and I really appreciate the conversation, and I look forward to hearing more of your podcasts and continuing the dialogue.
That's it, so I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.